When you play the Game of Thrones, you
Subscribe and like.
or you die. There is no middle ground.
All right, hello YouTube. Welcome back to the Grease Comedy YouTube channel. Today's video, we're going to be continuing on our Song of Ice and Fire reread, and we will be doing Catelyn 7 today. This chapter is going to be completely about kind of the landscape of what's going on in the world. So at this point, we're getting rumors again that Jaime is getting a host in the Westerlands, and all of kind of the reactions to what Catelyn has done with capturing Tyrion in the wider world as it's become more common knowledge. And also we're going to see the resolution of the kind of the Vale plot in this chapter, what the politics are going to be looking like, and Catelyn's departure and a lot of that, and also the first trial by combat. Now this chapter, something I really want to you guys to look at as I'm talking about this chapter, and I'm going to try to reference it as much as I can, is how similar the trial by combat is for the first time Tyrion has one, and then also the second time he has one in A Storm of Swords. The parallels are very similar. So I just want you guys to kind of keep that in the back of your mind. But let's start on page 431. The chapter opens with Catelyn looking out her windows and seeing the sun coming up, lighting the world below and the mountain of Alyssa's tears. Very importantly, Catelyn notes how Alyssa Arryn has watched her husband and all of her children die, but yet she shed no tear. And the parallels are very striking because by the end of Catelyn's, I guess, journey with life, because when she comes back, she's not really alive anymore, and she's not really Catelyn anymore either. She is figuratively watched as, again, her husband has died. All of her children are either dead, missing, or being captured right now, with Sansa and Tyrion being married at that time. And so it's very striking the way Catelyn and Alyssa Arryn are very similar. And Catelyn is also this character that's constantly being told she needs to be strong for Robb. Robb is going through all these stresses of being king, and that Catelyn must be strong for him, to shed no tear. And it's very interesting because a lot of that is actually going to lead to some of Catelyn's more impulsive and emotional choices she's going to make. Notably, the biggest one for, I think, her arc is when she releases Jaime. So again, I just think a lot of parallels here. But it was said the gods and death had let her weep, and that one day her tears would cover all the Vale. As of yet, none had hit the plains of the Vale, though. Catelyn wonders how much of a trail her tears will have when she dies, which is, again, very striking given the way that Catelyn ends up dying. Catelyn then tells Roderick to tell her the rest of the news, and Roderick informs her that Jaime Lannister is massing a host in Casterly Rock. Now, I also want to point this out because I think it's interesting talking about all these tears, is that the tears of Lys, a poison that is, used to kill Jon Arryn, is also a very big focal point of kind of this chapter and Lys's arc as well up to now. So just a lot of parallels going on with just this opening chapter that I really love. It's something that I particularly did not remember on my last reread. And so I just wanted to point that out because I think it's very important to understanding Catelyn's character and a lot of foreshadowing to what will happen with her and the Stark house as a whole. That gets into page 432. So moving into it, Roderick continues stating that Edmure says he has written to Tywin to demand to know his intent, which is very obvious. Again, you see a person basically rearming, preparing for war. Catelyn has just taken Tyrion prisoner. It's pretty obvious. Now, I do think Edmure is kind of taking the right route. When you look at public perception of the war, Catelyn has kind of created a lot of issues where like I talked about kind of in the last video I did, where you can kind of justify where the Lannisters and Cersei are coming from. But Edmure is kind of trying to play the victim in this, right? Don't be the first one to strike. Be the kind of the reactionary force. Let Tywin play the villain, because at this point, right, if you're a Tully force, you're thinking, okay, Robert's still king, Ned's still the hand of the king in a position of a lot of power. If we can, weather this storm, we should come out on this side right. So I think Edmure is actually kind of smart in the way he starts by handling this conflict. Edmure has said that he has ordered Lord Vance and Piper to guard the Golden Tooth, and that no Tully land will be given without drawing Lannister blood. Now, Tywin is going to play with this idea as well, And I guess I definitely understand where Edmure's coming from. It's like, you don't want Tywin and the Lannisters to be raiding, which hasn't happened yet, but it will very soon. You don't want that Tywin raiding all of your peasants, your farms, the things that help feed the Riverlands, and destroying your people, right? The innocents. And that's very noble, but what that's going to end up doing is it actually is going to hurt the Tullys quite a lot, and there are ways they're able to defend the Riverlands, because you can't be everywhere at once, and you start to spread yourself too thin. And especially when you look at one kingdom versus the other, the Lannisters are far wealthier, they have far more manpower, and geographically and all of that, they are safer. If we look at the Riverlands, and this is something that's very prominent when we look at the time, you know, right before Aegon's conquest, the Riverlands passed from this ruler to that ruler, and people fought over that land all of the time. It's the place of war because it's the easiest to attack. And so I think that's something that is very interesting to look at, because Edmure is having a noble cause and very honorable, but at the same time probably is not going about this the right way when it comes to actual military defense. And another thing we kind of learn here is that Edmure has a thing for heroics, right? Something that's going to come up later on when it comes to Robb's campaign with the West, and something that's going to get Edmure into trouble. Again, wasn't his fault, but kind of just showing that that's kind of who Edmure is at this point. Catelyn then turning away from the beautiful dawn. It did little to improve her mood, but she says that Edmure has done things and made vows, but what of her father? Is he not in charge? Again, just to remember, Hoster Tully is still in charge. He is not this person that is just dead, right? Edmure, kind of on the face value, should not be the person giving all these orders, but there's no, word mentioned of Hoster, which is probably not a good omen. And again, just kind of pointing to this idea that, younger people have to step up, and they're really not ready for these positions. I don't think Edmure really is ready to be the Lord. I think he's still a bit young of heart, trying to find glory. But Catelyn also notes how Roderick is looking himself again with his whiskers, and Cat notes that all the same that they should have been awoken immediately when this message came. And you would have think that they would have, right? This is a family emergency, right? This heavily impacts Lysa, Blackfish, and also Catelyn. Because not only does this affect, again, their family, the Tullys, but it affects Ned, it affects the Starks. What will they do? How will they react? And it's one of those things where, again, it just shows how Lysa is not taking things seriously. She's going to be very much an isolationism or isolation kingdom. They are not going to get involved. And this is all just that planting of that seed that something else is going on here, right? Like, why is Lysa doing this? And just showing that Lysa has been manipulated so well by Littlefinger. And Roderick says that Lysa had thought it better for you to sleep, or that is what Maester Coleman had told him. Either way, Catelyn is not happy. She should have been woken. Roderick continues saying that Coleman had started, that Lysa wanted to speak to her about it after the melee. Catelyn once again is not pleased with this, as she notes how Tyrion is playing Lysa the fool, which is true, right? How have we gone from the scenario where you have Tyrion as your prisoner? He's an invaluable prisoner at this point, right? Because he's a hostage. You can use him to your benefit. And now we've come to the situation where there's a trial by combat, where it's a lose-lose situation for Lysa and the Tullys as a whole. Because now, not only has Catelyn basically started a war, that prisoner is either going to walk free or is going to be executed. There is no scenario in which Lysa and Catelyn win. Oh, maybe you kill one of these Lannisters. Well, you quite literally killed the only one that didn't have any malice against you beforehand and was not involved in any of it. So it's just one of those things where you look at Catelyn, and we talk about this all the time with her, is that when she is not the person in power or in judgment, or she's looking at other people's decisions, she's a great objective. She's kind of the voice of reason for us. And she's kind of like, this is how I think the best example is if you have two friends that are arguing, and you are in Catelyn's position, and you kind of see both of their arguments, and you understand where they should be meeting. What is the reasonable conclusion based off of their arguments? That's how Catelyn is used a lot by George. A lot in these, especially the first two books. And that's just kind of what she's going to be really in this chapter for us. And Catelyn notes that it was past time she and Roderick went home to Winterfell and to her sons. which is something she should have already done, but she did on this whole Tyrion plot. She will ask for a ship from Goldtown to go north, which Roderick's not very happy about. If you guys remember when they were heading south to King's Landing, Roderick got very sick. He did not enjoy the journey. Roderick has been through the ringer, right? Has had to go through the high roads and the high pass. He's had to go on, again, ships, which he gets very seasick. He's kind of been through the ringer, not gonna lie. But he begrudgingly agrees with it, and it is the fastest and safest way. So again, I can't blame Catelyn here. Like, it's much safer than going on the King's Road, especially with all these tensions of war going on, and it is the fastest route as well, because again, Catelyn was given all these instructions by Ned, and she didn't bring them to Robb, right? There was a letter that was sent and all that, but like, it's not the same. Catelyn then calls for her servants that Lysa has provided her, and thought she ought to speak to Lysa before the melee. Maybe she could dissuade her from this course, as Lysa's mood changed hourly. The shy girl she had known had changed into a prideful, fearful, cruel, dreamy, reckless, stubborn, timid, and above all, inconstant woman. Which again, Catelyn is completely right. Right, Lysa has turned into someone that is not a very pleasant person. She is someone that is not going to really be a help given if we go to war. And I think that's something that Catelyn is starting to really understand. But that is going to move us into page 433. So moving into page 433, Catelyn then notes that when Mord had come to them with Tyrion's message, she had wanted to do it privately. Again, the smart thing to do. But no, Lysa had to make a show of it. And now this trial was happening. Again, just another way of establishing that Catelyn can be very smart and is in a decent amount of these situations, but Lysa wanted her show of breaking Tyrion, which she did not. Catelyn remarked to Roderick that Lannister is still her prisoner as they are making their way down one of the towers in the cold white halls of the Eyrie, and that Lysa needs to be reminded of that. Because again, this is again one of those moments where Catelyn doesn't really understand the power dynamic at this point. Yes, Catelyn, you are the one that captured Tyrion, but you've now brought him to the Vale, the Eyrie, right? Lysa has all the power here. You have nothing. You have maybe a couple swords loyal to you. It's not enough, right? You can't say, okay, we're not doing this, and just take Tyrion. It's out of her hands now. That's one of the biggest issues with bringing Tyrion to the Eyrie. As they get to Lysa's apartments, the Blackfish comes storming out, asking if they are going to the Fool's Festival, and that he would ask her to smack some sense into Lysa, but it would only bruise her hand. Lysa was a lost cause. One of my favorite lines from the early book is, again, this line of, if you smack Lysa, you would only bruise your hand. So it's basically the idea of, like, if you're talking to someone, and it's this idea of, like, oh, you're hitting your head against a brick wall, like nothing is happening. That's what Blackfish is trying to tell her. And I feel like Catelyn should kind of already know this, I feel like, just given how Lysa has acted already. But yeah, really setting the tone for where this chapter is going to go. Catelyn notes there was a letter to which Blackfish already knows. He had to hear it from Coleman. Blackfish had asked Lysa for leave to take 1,000 seasoned men and go to Riverrun. And Lysa had told him the Vale cannot spare even one man, and that his place is here. Which is very wild to say, given that the Blackfish's home is Riverrun. This is, again, his brother that's going to possibly be under siege, his nephew, all of these things. And again, asking for 1,000 seasoned men under the Blackfish's sole control is a very dangerous force. We see what the Blackfish is able to do under Robb. Give him the Vale soldiers, which are some of the best trained in Westeros. That's a formidable force. And, you know, I know it's not like anything crazy, right? Because we're talking about, you know, armies of up to 20, 30, you know, even if we get to Renly's army, hundreds of thousands or 100,000 men or even more. Still, that's a lot of power to give the Blackfish. And you would think Lysa, who would care about her home, would grant such a simple request. Like, the idea that the Vale needs all of its swords is actually crazy, because out of all the kingdoms, in my opinion, they are the ones that need it the least. We just got done, again, learning about how do you even get up to the Eyrie. It takes like less than 2,000 men to defend it. Like, just defending all of the different outposts and the Bloody Gate, and then the Eyrie itself. It doesn't take a lot of men to defend this area. So you would think that maybe Lysa would do this, but again, it's this idea of Littlefinger telling her basically to stay out of it, that they're going to need all their swords, all these things. And it just doesn't make any sense when you don't know that background context information, especially like a character like Blackfish. And that's something that just pushes him over the edge. But what I also find interesting here is that Lysa says this idea that they cannot spare a single man. But yet, in this trial by combat, she is willing to spare a single man, Vardis, right? And I know that she had basically championed Vardis, not knowing that Tyrion was going to have a champion, but still there was like that 0.5% chance that Vardis could lose to Tyrion. Maybe Tyrion just gets in a good whack or something. But yeah, I did find that a little bit interesting, a little bit hypocritical. But at this, laughter is heard behind them, to Blackfish's disgust. He continues telling Lysa she can bloody well find a new knight of the gate, and that Blackfisher know he is still a Tully, and his place is in Riverrun. Catelyn was not surprised by this at all, and probably even counted on this, but tells Blackfish he cannot go alone in the high road, and urges him to come with them to Winterfell, and she will give him his 1,000 swords. This is a big move from Catelyn, just understanding, like, again, for one, she doesn't want her family to die, and she just wants her family to be around her. But two, understanding the value of someone like Blackfish. He's one of the most seasoned commanders in all of Westeros. He was at the War in the Stepstones with the Nine Penny Kings. He is someone that was an active participant in Robert's Rebellion. He is someone, again, that has so much military experience that can be invaluable to someone like Robb, or even Ned, if Ned is the one that ends up leading the wars, if that's what Catelyn believes. And so, again, great move here from Catelyn. Blackfish thinks this over and agrees. He notes it is the long way home, but he is more likely to actually get there. And he says he will wait below and take his leave, waiting for them. And that gets us into page 434. So, moving in, more laughter is then heard, and Catelyn and Roderick enter into what is the closest to a god's wood you could get up here. A weirwood would not take root being on a mountain, but dirt was hauled up and placed here with grass and flowers growing, with statues as well. This is where the trial would take place. Now, I think this is, again, very odd to think about. It's like, these people are so rich that they can have dirt, grass, flowers, all of these things brought up to the Eyrie just to have this garden thing. When there's people... again, we talk about the common folk so much in Feast. It's really one of the bigger one of the bigger kind of points of that book. And this is one of those things where it's like, these people are so rich they can do this, while other people are just struggling to survive, to eat, to have the bare human rights and necessity of having a home, having food, happiness, things like that. It really does like just show that whole idea. But it also, another thing it shows is just like how like difficult it is to have like really anything in the Eyrie, how everything has to be transported up. Just another one nice little reference to that. But Lysa is seen above the place where combat was going to happen, richly dressed and freshly cleaned, surrounded by her knights and lords of high and low birth, all still wanting to marry, bed, and rule with her. Catelyn notes from what she has seen, it is a vain hope. Again, it's Lysa playing appearances, right? Making it look like she is trying to court one of these men, and that eventually he will be the new Lord of the Vale. And again, you can't blame any of these men, right? Even though Lysa is not the most attractive woman at this point of her life, becoming Lord of the Vale, of the Eyrie, is an insane power move, right? If you're someone like a Lord Hunter, Lord Corbray, that's a big move. And especially when you look at Robb and Arryn right now, which is like, he's going to be the one that comes to the throne, or comes to lordship next. It is likely he could die before he even came to age. So you definitely see why there are so many people trying to court Lysa. But a wooden platform had been built so that Robin's chair was elevated, but here he saw a puppet show for Robin's entertainment, and food was laid out with wine. Blackfish had been right to call it a fool's festival. Lysa was seen with Lord Hunter and Corbray, who seemed to be her favorites today. And even Catelyn notes how they are bad suitors. Lord Hunter was even older than Jon Arryn, and Corbray was much more arrogant, reckless, and his house was much poorer than a lot of the other great houses in the Vale. And also are rumored to not like women either. Very interesting. So I do find it, interesting because in a lot of ways in Westeros, being, gay is not something that's frowned upon. It seems like very much just a religious thing. And because again, people, it seems like they openly know that Lord Corbray likes men, and people don't really seem to care outside of, okay, if you're making a marriage alliance type thing. But I thought that was a nice little interesting point to show that, we've seen a lot of medieval societies and things of that nature that isn't the case. Now, that's not completely true, right? There are aspects of Westeros that definitely crack down on that, especially when we see like the faith militant and things of that nature. But Catelyn again is right though. Neither one of these people is really a good match for Lysa. Again, just playing on the idea that like if Lysa was really taking this seriously, these would not be the men that she would even be trying to court. But at this, Lysa welcomes Catelyn with a kiss on her cheek and asking her to have some of the wine. Again, showing that Lysa is taking nothing seriously. That this is kind of a celebration, like a festival, when in reality, this is very dire. This is going to have a lot of effects on Westeros, and she's not taking it seriously. Catelyn denies the wine. Oh, by the way, we're getting into page 435 as I continue. Catelyn denies the wine graciously, but says, "We need to talk." To which Lysa says, "After." And Catelyn, a bit louder than she had intended to, says, "No, now." Drawing looks from others around her. Again, just really getting this feeling that Catelyn just had enough of Lysa. I just had enough of the constant not taking anything seriously, how people's lives are in danger, and Lysa still refuses to do anything. And Catelyn kind of loses her cool here. Catelyn continues saying that alive, Tyrion has value, but dead, he has no value. And if Bronn should succeed, but at this she is interrupted. As Lord Hunter says, there is small chance of that, as Vardis is a great fighter and will make short work of Bronn. But Catelyn questions this, saying, will he? She recounts Bronn on the journey up the Vale, on the high road, and it was no chance that he had survived. He moved like a panther, and his sword was part of his arm. Morton Waynwood then pipes up saying, women do not know about this stuff, which is again wild to say given none of the people here outside of Catelyn have actually seen Bronn fight. It's again going into this, just, I guess, classism, or maybe just looking at what you do for work and judging you instantly. But again, because Bronn is a sellsword, and a lot of people in Westeros do not like sellswords, right? They are highly discriminated against. Not like is in Essos, right? Essos is much more accepting to sellswords, is much more common. That line of work in Westeros is definitely talked down to. But Morton continues saying that Vardis is a knight, and that Bronn is a sellsword rabble. Again, showing that because someone is a knight, it makes them instantly a great fighter that can never lose, and that sellswords are just rabble. They're no good, which is very interesting. And that Bronn is a coward, which again makes no sense, just given on he fought so hard to get up to here, get up to the mountain of the Vale. He also went on this journey that took a decent amount of courage, and also he had a lot of courage to stand up for Tyrion against someone as formidable as Vardis. But Morton continues, noting that 1,000 of his kind is an army and can be useful, but isolated, his courage will leave him. Again, this just doesn't make any sense, and it's just kind of dumb. Catelyn then responds as curtly as possible that say you have the truth of it, what will we gain from his death? Which is great, because Catelyn is kind of playing the game here. She's not instantly refuting Morton, even though she wants to, but she's trying to take the political route, like trying to show them, what does this matter, right? Even if Bronn wins, even if Vardis wins, it shouldn't matter. Do you think that, and again, she continues, do you think Jaime Lannister will give a shit that we gave him a trial before he flung him off a mountain? Which is another great point, right? Jaime is going to attack if Tyrion dies, and even will attack without that. Corbray suggests to lop off Tyrion's head and send it to him as a message and warning. And that I noted might be the stupidest thing anyone has said the entire first book so far. Like, do you understand Jaime as a character at all? He's a very arrogant person. He will defend Tyrion till the end. This would inflame him even more. Now, maybe you could use that as part of your strategy, right? You draw Jaime in, really build on his anger and set a trap, right? You can do that. But that's not what's being said here at all. At this, Lysa pipes up saying that Robin wants to see him fly, and that if it was Tyrion's own fault, well, that it was Tyrion's own fault, he is the one who wanted the trial by combat. Which again, we already talked about this with the last Tyrion chapter, but what choice did he have? He was being basically tortured. He wasn't going to survive if he went back into prison, and he wasn't going to be given a legit trial, given about how Robin already wants to see him fly. What choice? They didn't leave him with any choices. Lord Hunter also pipes up, saying Lysa had no honorable way to deny Tyrion. And it's really weird that we're talking about honor when it comes to Lysa, given the way she treated Tyrion, given a way there's been no evidence against Tyrion, but yet he's basically being condemned to die. Very interesting that that argument gets brought up here. But Catelyn tries her last Hail Mary, stating that Tyrion is her prisoner, and Lysa doesn't take very nicely to this, saying that it was her husband that he killed, which is very interesting when we go back to, again, I don't know if I've mentioned that this much in this plot line, but when we go back to the letter that had been sent, or the message that had been sent to Catelyn at the beginning of the story, it was not Tyrion that killed Jon Arryn at all. It was someone different. Lysa continues stating that Tyrion poisoned her husband and left Robin fatherless, and now she means to see him pay. And another thing that's interesting to know is, like, Lysa knows Tyrion did not kill him, which is very interesting that she just wants to see these Lannisters killed. She wants a scapegoat, really, right? Because if she can say, oh yeah, it was Tyrion that did it, any suspicion on maybe who actually did kill Jon Arryn dies with Tyrion. So that's just another interesting point to look at. But at this, Lysa exits with Hunter and Corbray following her. Roderick then asks if she actually thinks Tyrion did it. He is denying it very fiercely, but Catelyn notes that she knows a Lannister did it. Just not sure which did so. Which is wrong, but given the information she knows is not a bad observation. She wishes she could go back and burn that letter before even reading it. Again, going back to the one with her, Ned, and Luwin, and what forced Ned to become Hand of the King. Again, thinking about all that has come from the letter and how Catelyn reacted to it and how it put others in harm's way. Roderick notes that if it was poison, Tyrion could have done it well enough, but he has heard that poison is a woman's weapon, and that maybe Cersei did it. Now, this is interesting because George gives us really this constant hint that poison is a woman's weapon. This is not the first time we've heard this in this story, right? We've heard this multiple times. And the key here is that George gives us the information to figure out the answer, that it's Lysa that was kind of behind all this, but it's the Cersei. We put someone else there that, oh, the audience all thinks, oh yeah, it's obviously got to be Cersei, right? Jon Arryn figured out the parentage stuff, and so Cersei basically had him killed. And that's what I love about George's writing, is he gives you the answer, but there's another answer that seems more likely at the time. Roderick then finishes saying he does not like Jaime, but Jaime is not the type. He is too prone to wanting blood on his sword. He finishes asking if it actually was poison. And Catelyn notes, what else could it have been, right? It looked like a pretty natural death. It had to have been poison. At this, Catelyn notes her nephew Robin and how he has no discipline or hope of ruling unless he is taken away from his mother. At this point, Coleman, who's been drinking quite a lot, comes up noting that Jon Arryn had agreed with her, and that is why he was going to be sent to Dragonstone. Now, this is very interesting, very different than we've heard at this point, because what we've been told so far by Robert is that Robin was supposed to go with Tywin Lannister, but that's not actually the case. And Catelyn even notes this, right? She says, wait, he was supposed to be fostered at Casterly Rock. You have the wrong of this. But let's show why this is important right off the bat. This is a massive reveal that I think the average, the first time reader kind of looks over. One, it shows that Jon Arryn kept a lot of things from Robert Baratheon. He didn't tell him everything, which is important. Two, this shows that Jon was well aware of how dangerous the Lannisters were, and sending them the future Boy Lord of the Vale would be almost like sending Theon to the Starks. And the third thing that's the most important is that Jon Arryn trusted Stannis quite a lot. These are all interesting things to think about, because what do all of these things have in common? Jon Arryn figuring out Robert Baratheon's children are not actually his. Now, what does that do, right? If he figures this out and goes to tell Robert, well, Robin can't be with Tywin, because then, okay, Jon now can't attack the Lannisters, or else Robin's going to die. So you send him with the person you trust the most, the person you've been investigating all of this stuff with, Stannis. I think it's a really nice, it's some of the best foreshadowing that kind of goes under the radar at this point of the story. But that moves us into page 437. Catelyn then responds saying he is mistaken, and that it was not Casterly Rock, not Dragonstone, and the arrangements were made after Jon's death and against Lysa's wishes. Coleman jerks his head vigorously, again stating that no, that it was Lord Jon when he is interrupted, with the bells being rung to signal the time for the trial. And again, Coleman is very, sure, he's confident that is the way things are going down, which should be news to Catelyn. Again, just poking this idea on Lysa's motivations here. She had thought this whole time that, okay, one of the biggest reasons that she retreats to the Eyrie is because of Robin being sent to the Lannisters. It's a whole different story if Jon had been planning to do it instead. Tyrion is brought in by 2 guards and a septon. They lead Tyrion to the statue of Alyssa, again connecting back to Alyssa Arryn. Robin very happily announces the bad little man and asks if they can make him fly now, and Lysa responds later. Corbray continues saying there must be the trial, then the execution. At this, the 2 fighters are brought in, Vardis helped by squires and such, and Bronn with the master of arms. Vardis in one hand was steel from head to toe and was armored very heavily, as well as being in very fashionable armor, similar to, say, Renly's or Loras, really again showing the power of the Vale, how much, how rich they are and how they're able to afford this type of armor. On the other side, Catelyn notes how Bronn appears almost half naked in comparison. Bronn was wearing mostly leather with armor here and there, and old ringmail as well. And again, Catelyn already picks up on some of the advantages, right? Bronn is taller than Vardis and has a longer reach, and Catelyn judges that Vardis is 15 years older, all recipes for failure with Vardis. Now, again, we instantly just see the differences. So again, I want to go back to, or I guess we're going to go forward to the second trial by combat. I've done a chapter analysis on that chapter with the Mountain and Oberyn's fight, and it's one of my favorite videos on the channel, so I definitely highly recommend it if you want to see kind of what I'm talking about. But something I'm going to really talk about in this chapter a lot is the fighting style and the approaches by both fighters. Now, Oberyn's approach in that fight, again, Oberyn was also very lightly armored, and his main objective was to keep the Mountain at a reach, right? That's why he uses a very long spear, so that he can, make his thrust. It's very similar to boxing. It's the analogy I used quite a lot in that video, where if you are someone with the longer, arm or wingspan, you can keep someone at a distance and not let them, get inside you and, basically hit the big power punches. That's the huge advantage of having reach. And so when Catelyn is noticing that, that's going to be very influential, especially when Vardis is heavily armored. And that's something that's really needs to be picked up on. It's really something that's smart from Bronn. But at this, Bronn and Vardis are made to kneel, facing each other, with Tyrion in the middle. The Septon pulls a crystal spear, holding it up, and asks for the gods to look down on them, and to judge if Tyrion is innocent or guilty. And that will get us into page 438. All right, so moving into page 438, the Septon then flees the scene, and Tyrion whispers something into Bronn's ear, making him laugh and rise to his feet. Again, just showing the connection the two have kind of made at this point. But at this, Robin asks when they are going to fight. But what is very interesting here is whereas Bronn was able to get up very easily, again, he's not armed that heavily, Vardis actually needs help to rise. Again, this is showing the sheer amount of weight he is bearing, and that, again, he's already like had this armor on, he's having to be helped up. It's just going to show why Bronn is able to win the fight. But Vardis then took a huge triangular shield as if he didn't need more weight, but Bronn denies one from the Master of Arms. And Cat notes the facial hair now on Bronn, noting he could shave it as his sword seemed extremely sharp, as if he had been honing it for days. Vardis then received the sword he was to wield, which was very richly made, with a falcon pommel with wings to the side. Again, very flamboyant, flexing the richness of House Aaron. Lysa notes she had it made for Jon, and he sat the Iron Throne with it. She thought it would be fitting for Jon's sword to be wielded to avenge him, which is another advantage Vardis is going to have. He's not even using his actual sword, a sword that he would have trained with, practiced with, or even been in combat with before. He's now using someone else's sword, having to try and get used to, again, maybe the balance of the sword or how it even feels. And Cat again notes that, but she does not say anything, not wanting to start another argument. Robin is growing even more impatient and says to make them fight. Vardis turns to him and says, for the Eyrie and Vale. And Bronn salutes to Tyrion. Lysa then says, they are waiting for your command, and Robin screams, fight. That gets us into page 439. So moving into page 439, the battle now begins. The two start by clashing their swords a few times, just kind of figuring out where the range is and all of those things. Again, just like how you would see in a boxing match. One thing I think is very interesting, the way George writes a lot of these trials by combat, is it's very much like boxing. You think about when you're boxing, a lot of the times when you first see a fight start, you'll have a lot of, okay, testing where your range is. Where can you see an opening? And that's what these two do. Bronn continues to try and circle to Vardis's unprotected side. Again, Vardis on one side has the huge shield. Bronn can't really hit him on that side, so he's going to try and get the other side where his shield is not. And this has another effect as having to make Vardis very active in the fight, worry about his positioning, always making him turning, using his body weight and sheer armor that's on him to basically protect himself. But Bronn continues to constantly make Vardis move. Bronn even baits Vardis into two swings on uneven ground, and Bronn is too far away with a smile on his face, knowing the advantage. Again, Bronn just realizes he can keep a certain distance away that Vardis will not be able to hit him, but that also Bronn can make strikes, and that's just a huge advantage at this point. But Bronn continues moving to the left, and Lord Hunter is seen calling Bronn a craven and to stand and fight, with others murmuring in agreement. At this, Roderick notes that Bronn is trying to tire him, and even the strongest man under that armor will tire. And I really, again, want to just compare that to what Oberyn's strategy was. Now, Oberyn's strategy, I don't think, was more or less to, like, try and tire the Mountain, more as it was that he could do the most amount of damage, pick away at the Mountain's defenses from range. As Catelyn continues to watch, she notes how this is different. She had watched swordplay every day of her life, but this was one misstep meant death. She was reminded of another duel, one between Brandon Stark and Littlefinger. They had met at the Bailey at Riverrun. Littlefinger had asked for her favor, but Catelyn was promised to Brandon, and so gave him her favor, and asked that Littlefinger not be killed, as she had loved him like a brother. Something else as to note is that, seeing that Littlefinger had very little armor, Brandon actually took off his armor in response, showing again some of the honor and things that Brandon had. We always talk about Brandon being this kind of wild wolf character, but he still did have a lot of that armor or honor that we see a character like Ned having, and a lot of the Starks just in general. But the duel was over as fast as it had begun. Brandon was a man grown and stronger, and beat him easily, giving him multiple minor wounds, all the while telling him to yield. Again, Brandon gave Littlefinger multiple times to back down, but Littlefinger would not. Eventually, Brandon dealt him a savage blow to his ribs, which Cat thought was fatal, as Littlefinger said, "Cat," as he fell. She thought she had forgotten this. Now, I think this is interesting because given what this is the last time that Catelyn had seen Littlefinger, and that's what she notes since seeing him in King's Landing, why does Catelyn trust Littlefinger so much? Like, Littlefinger nearly died fighting for her. Catelyn, again, spurned him on multiple occasions. And I just don't understand where, again, Brandon Stark related to Ned Stark, that resemblance would be there. Littlefinger would have that hatred for Ned. Why does Catelyn in any world think, hey, let me trust Littlefinger? And I guess it's maybe Catelyn playing on that, oh, well, Littlefinger is like a brother to her type situation. But it's like, Catelyn, you have to be blind to not really understand what Littlefinger's motivations are. And that's just something that I think, again, we talk about this at the beginning of this chapter. Catelyn is great looking at other people's problems, but her own problem, not so good. And this is a fatal flaw that ends up getting Ned killed. So there is that. That was the last time she had seen him before King's Landing. And after Littlefinger had been healed, Catelyn had been forbade to see him by Hoster Tully. Lysa had went and stayed with him while he was healing. And even Edmure had tried, but he had been squiring for Brandon and was sent away. After a while, Hoster sent Littlefinger away to finish his healing on the sisters as well. And again, this is done for quite a lot of reasons. One, he got Lysa pregnant. That's a pretty big one. Two, trying to challenge Catelyn's marriage to Brandon. This guy's just got to go. He's got to go. But something that's interesting to note is how Lysa had a good relationship with Littlefinger. And that's something that, you know, Catelyn doesn't really think about. She doesn't really think about that relationship. The two were in King's Landing together for a very long time. So it's something that, again, Catelyn doesn't really put together. The ringing of steel brought Catelyn back to reality as she noticed Varda sending a flurry of attacks at Bronn, but none even came close. Bronn was just too quick and was managing the not-so-great footing conditions. After the last savage swipe missed Bronn hits Vardis on the shoulder plate. At this, Bronn slides behind the statue, which blocks Vardis's last big attack. Robin notes how they are not fighting well, and he wants them to fight. And Lysa agrees, saying Bronn cannot run forever. And to that, I disagree. Bronn can run forever, as Vardis is continuing. All of these swings are just wearing him down. That's the whole goal here. If you're Bronn, it's just make him move around, make him have to take these long, huge swings with all of that armor on, and it's working pretty well. Because not only is Vardis going to get tired, he's going to get frustrated. He's going to start being like, okay, you know, you're not fighting me, getting angry. And when that emotion is going to take over, it's something we see why Oberyn loses, right? That's going to make you make a mistake, do bad things. So Bronn right now is keeping a very level head at this point. That's something else that's working wonders for him. But moving into page 441, the other lords murmured in agreement, filling up their wine cups. But at this moment, Bronn steps out from behind the statue and aims a vicious strike at Vardis's head. Vardis blocks it very clumsily, and it puts him off balance. Vardis braces for another attack, and Bronn hacks into the shield. But again, Bronn slips to Vardis's unguarded side and deals him a slice to the stomach, leaving a red gash in the plate. And this is where Bronn has pretty much won the fight at this point. It's not like Bronn hasn't, like, you know, taken him out yet, but at this point, he's now done a huge injury to Vardis. Vardis, you can tell, is just not reacting quick enough at this point, and it's not looking good for Vardis. Vardis tries to counter, driving him off of his back foot, but once again, Bronn dodges, and Vardis goes flying into the statue. Vardis' vision being blocked by his helmet cannot seem to find Bronn. Again, another massive issue for having one of these large helmets that kind of impair your vision to the sides. Lord Hunter tries to warn him, saying, "He is behind you," but it was too late. Bronn brought his sword down on Vardis's sword arm at the elbow, crunching the armor in the joint. Vardis grunts in pain and tries to respond, but this time Bronn holds the ground, meeting steel with steel. Again, Bronn's just very confident at this point. Vardis is all but defeated at this point. He's taken a couple injuries at this point. They've been fighting for a while, and now it's time for Bronn's strike. Roderick noted that Vardis was hurt, but Catelyn did not need to be told. Vardis was bloody all over and cut in multiple places. Vardis was slowing down with his parries and movement. Vardis tried to block with his shield, but Bronn was getting quicker, sidestepping it. Even now, they could hear Vardis struggling for breath. And again, Vardis's tank is just running out. It's so bad that you can hear him basically huffing and puffing, and he's struggling just to breathe. And it isn't even helped, again, by the idea that you have a massive helmet on, that you're not being able to get all the air in that you can possibly get in. And so that's starting to affect Vardis at this point. And so moving into page 442, the Lords of the Vale now begin to see what was happening, but Lysa did not, telling Vardis to finish him. Again, Lysa is blind to what's really going on. Vardis follows the commands to the last and attempted one last charge, hitting Bronn with his shield, nearly making him lose his footing, but Bronn grabbed hold of the statue to stay up. Now, this could have been fatal if Bronn had fallen here. And this is something we talk about when Bronn, could have fought the Mountain for Tyrion in the second trial. It's like, if this mistake had happened against the Mountain would have killed him. And that's kind of the difference between someone like Vardis and the Mountain. So Vardis threw away his shield and went for one last killing blow, but Bronn, like he's done this whole fight, dodges. He moves backward just in time to avoid the strike, and the sword hits the statue, breaking, and Bronn, seeing his opportunity, pushes the statue onto his foe, and they go crashing down. But before Vardis could do anything, Bronn was on him and did the killing blow into Vardis's ribs, killing him. And that gets us into page 443. Silence hung over the Eyrie as Bronn took off his helmet, showing the blood on his face and spitting out the broken teeth. He lost these because of, again, the shield bash that Vardis had done. Robin then asked if it is over, and Cat wanted to tell him no, it is only the beginning. Again, releasing Tyrion, it's not a good move. This is not a good move. It's honestly, it looks really bad on the Eyrie, right? You take Tyrion prisoner and then you let him walk free. It's a very bad look. And again, Catelyn just noting the war to come. Lysa responds, yes, very unhappily. And Robin asks if we can make him fly. But Tyrion denies this, saying he is going down with the turnips. A nice little callback again to the way that you come up the Eyrie and how Tyrion had actually refuted that, but Catelyn had gone up it. Just a nice little callback to that. And Lysa begins to talk, saying, you presume, and is cut off, with Tyrion saying, the Arryns know their own words, high as honor. Which, again, nice play. Do not let Lysa try and get anything out of this. Make her stick to her word in front of all of these lords, saying how honorable they are. Robin is extremely upset, saying he was promised he could make him fly. But Lysa continues saying he was proven innocent, and that he must be set free, and for him to be escorted to the Bloody Gate and given supplies to make it to the Trident. They will need it on the high road. And this is something that maybe Tyrion didn't see coming, right? Because he acts kind of shocked, because maybe he thought, okay, given the honor that he could play on them, that he would be able to get a ship back to King's Landing, or maybe all the way back over to Lannisport. That's not the case. And this is just another death sentence. It's what Catelyn notes. Like, they barely made it up with, 10 companions. I think it was somewhere around there. And now there's only going to be Tyrion and Bronn. It's another death sentence that's even probably worse. And Tyrion notes this, saying, the high road? Lysa has one last look of satisfaction as Catelyn realizes another death sentence. And Tyrion must know that as well. But Tyrion, again, not letting his mouth get the best of him, says nothing, but bows and says, as you command, we know the way. And that is where the chapter ends. So I hope you guys all enjoyed this week's reread. It was a really fantastic chapter. These trial by combat chapters are just always fantastic. The way George is able to write a very compelling duel. And yeah, so thank you guys all for watching. And And I'll see you guys all in next week's reread or another video this week. Bye, guys.